So with the season now over, guys, I thought that now would be a good time to definitively give you my rankings for every single Championship manager this season. So we're going to be putting them into a tier list, as we like to do on this channel, and I'd love to get your guys' input as to what you made of basically every manager so far this season. So the categories that we're going to be throwing these managers into are poor, underachieved, solid, good, very good, and elite. If you do go to enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. But without any further ado, let's hop into ranking these managers. So we may as well start out with the first managerial departure of the season, that being Siewert, in charge of just 3 league games this season for Huddersfield. I mean, I did more episodes of career mode than this guy managed games for Huddersfield this season. Huddersfield were coming off the back of a really poor season in the Premier League, and Siewert came into this season in the Championship, had a bit of a look around, and then just left straight back out. It was like a revolving door. He only won one of his 90 matches there. I don't think there's any dispute in this one. He goes into the bottom tier. Jose Gomez at Reading was another managerial departure which happened fairly early on into the season. He was sacked in October as Reading were sat in the bottom 3 after 11 games. They picked up just 8 points. I think I'm going to have to throw him into the underachievers category. There was quite a bit of potential about Gomez. I thought with the way that Reading ended last season, there was quite a bit of hype coming into this season for them, and I really thought that he would be long term the right man for the job, but it just wasn't to be at Reading, was it? And then we get to Mr. Championship himself. He just never seems to stop going, Neil Warnock, doesn't he? Now, we're judging Neil Warnock off his 2 managerial stints this season, the first half of the season at Cardiff and the second half of the season at Middlesbrough. At Cardiff, I think it's fair to say he did underachieve. He left them when they were 14th in the table. Things just weren't quite happening for them at Cardiff, and they needed that refresh under Neil Harris. But since he came at Middlesbrough, did a really good job there. In the 8 games he was in charge for, won 4, lost 4, managed to secure them their Championship status. Going into next season, I think there's quite a lot to like about Neil Warnock and the project like Middlesbrough. But for this season, I'd throw him into the solid category. I think for Borough did a really good job, but probably underachieved for Cardiff, so I'd throw him in the middle there. Speaking of Middlesbrough though, we then get to Jonathan Woodgate. Now, coming into this season, I was full of hope of what Jonathan Woodgate could potentially deliver at Borough. Middlesbrough were just coming off a season where they just missed out on the top 6, but this season didn't go to plan. That squad shouldn't have been in a relegation battle for me. And when it was looking really feasible, like Middlesbrough could get relegated, Jonathan Woodgate was sacked. So for Woodgate, I'm probably going to have to throw him into that poor category for this season. Mark Warburton at QPR, I've been impressed by this season. I think that considering that he had to rebuild this whole squad pretty much on a shoestring budget, he's actually done a very capable job at QPR. They played some really good football along the way as well, some really attractive, fast-flowing football. Defensively hasn't always been the best, and since lockdown they did hit a bit of a rocky patch, but that sort of level of inconsistency is to be expected in the Championship, really, and considering what he was working with, I'm going to throw him into the good category. I think he's done well this season. Next up to Gary Rowett at Millwall. Now, I've been very impressed with what he's been able to do. Took over Millwall in October when they were sat 17th in the table. Considering that at the start of the season they were one of the favourites to be relegated, the fact that he's got them playing this really good style of football, I know there's always the stereotype that's going to follow Millwall wherever they go, that they're this big physical team, and they have got a bit about them in their side, but I go back to the game I saw them play at Deepdale this season. They out-footballed us for 90 minutes. From where he took them and the football he's got them playing, I'm going to throw Gary Rowett into that very good category. I think that sometimes you just get a manager in the club that blend perfectly, and I think that's a good example of that this season. Graeme Jones for Luton Town, tough one to judge really. He left during the lockdown when Luton was sat 23rd in the table. I think that most people did sort of expect that Luton would be in this relegation scrap, so placing Jones somewhere is always a tough one, but I know that a lot of Luton fans towards the end of Jones' tenure there did think it was coming towards the end. And then what we saw Nathan Jones do with the exact same group of players after, you'd probably have to throw Graeme Jones into that underachieved pile, wouldn't you? Gerhard Struber at Barnsley, I mean, he pretty much pulled off the impossible keeping this Barnsley side up, didn't he? When he came in, they were rock bottom of the table. They'd only won 1 of their first 16 matches, and they looked destined for League One, let's be real, didn't they? I think that any manager would have gone in there and struggled to galvanise this squad and get enough quality for them to pick up enough points for them to go on and survive. And the fact that they survived on the last day and pulled off as many upsets as they did in the second half of this season, I'm going to have to throw him into that very good pile for the work he did there at Barnsley this season. And then we get to Lee Johnson of Bristol City. This one for Lee Johnson very much felt like it was now or never. You know, he was heavily backed in the summer. I know he wasn't always helped. You know, Bristol City did lose some pretty big players throughout the year. You know, at the start of the season, lost Adam Webster, halfway through lost Josh Brownhill, but there was no doubt that financially Lee Johnson was heavily backed. You know, how many other teams got to purchase a striker like Naki Wells in January? Bristol City is a club that always tends to show ambition, and Lee Johnson this season just couldn't quite match that. You know, we all call him, you know, streaky Lee Johnson, goes on these mad winning and losing streaks, and this season that just caught up to him a little bit more. It felt like this season would be the year that Bristol City could finally break into the top 6, but Lee Johnson as a manager probably underachieved given everything that he had available to him, so I'll throw him into that category. Mark Bowen at Reading took over this side when they were in a little bit of trouble. You know, there was the possibility that they could get relegated early on into the season after the poor start they made under Jose Gomez, but he came in and sort of solidified things, had a really good impact when he was first introduced. Their first game being against North End, they scored a last minute winner in that one at the Majewski, but since then they've sort of just coasted this season, really, Reading, I'd say, haven't they? There was a lot of uncertainty about Mark Bowen because this was going to be his first managerial job, but overall I'd say he's done a solid job, you know, at Reading this season. Next up to Danny Cowley at Huddersfield Town. Now, he was coming into a really difficult job. Huddersfield were in a bit of a perilous position after the whole Jan Siewert debacle. There was definitely a Premier League hangover from last season. I think a group of players in that squad didn't really want to be there, and just overall there was a bit of a toxic atmosphere around the club, wasn't there? So Danny Cowley had to come in and galvanise not just this team but the football club as well. And it was a very difficult situation, like I said, that he was walking into, and considering that he managed to secure their safety with a game to go, it was that fantastic win over West Brom that did it. I'd throw Danny Cowley into the good category. Now, I'm interested to see where he does go next after he and Huddersfield parted ways as well. Gary Monk at Sheffield Wednesday, I think you have to throw into the underachiever category this season, considering what he was working with. And Wednesday actually started the season out fairly brightly. After 14 matches, they were just 1 point off second, sat 4th in the table, and then they just absolutely capitulated. As well as that, their home form throughout the year has been really poor. They only scored 19 goals at home this season, which is absolutely ridiculous. Like, you talk about value for money for a season ticket, I'd be wanting a refund if I was a Sheffield Wednesday fan. The job that Gary Monk's done there this season with what he's working with, like I say, I think you have to throw him into the underachiever. Alex Neil for Preston North End. Overall, I think he's done well for us. You know, it was disappointing that we fell off and we fell short of the top 6 in the end, only winning 2 of our last 12 matches, but considering what Alex Neil's working with and what we're actually up against with the rest of the championship and the financial backing that, you know, everyone else around us seems to have, Alex Neil's done a good job with this squad. It was just a shame that we couldn't go that extra mile and make it into the top 6 after such a promising start. You know, we were top of the table in October. Like I say, we just fell short in the end. But for Alex Neil overall, I'll throw him into the good category. He's once again being linked away to other championship jobs. I would be very sad to see him go, but Alex Neil this season, I think he's done a good job. Sabri Lamucci for Nottingham Forest. I would have put Lamucci right up there had they not absolutely bottled it come the end of the season, but taking everything into perspective, I still think Lamucci's the right man for Forest long term. I think a lot of the Forest fans would agree with that as well. Considering where Forest came from last season, you know, it was a very indifferent year under Aita Karanka and then Martin O'Neill, but their sloppy form towards the end of the season just caught up with them, didn't it? Conceding 1 too many goals in the later stages of matches. But for Lamucci overall, I still think he's had a good season for Forest. It's just I can't put him much higher than that with what happened on the final day. Michael O'Neill at Stoke has come in and done an absolutely fantastic job there. He came in 15 games into the season. Stoke were bottom of the table, having picked up just 8 points. And you have to say, considering the squad he was coming into, a win percentage so far of 43% is absolutely fantastic. Stoke have been flying since they appointed O'Neill. For the job he's done this season, guiding them into mid-table from where they were, I think he's done a very good job. And the same can be said for Thomas Frank and Brentford as well. He's took them all the way to the playoff final, and should Brentford get promoted, I may even bump him up a category further. But Thomas Frank this season, listen, Brentford had played some absolutely dazzling football. It was a slow start to the season, but Brentford persisted with him, and that more than paid off. They just couldn't quite go that one step further and get automatic promotion, but into a championship playoff final, anything can happen. For Thomas Frank, I'm going to throw him into the very good category, but should they win that final, I'd be tempted to push him a category further. Nathan Jones, another difficult one to judge really, because we're judging him off 2 different spells this season. His time at Stoke, which was absolutely disastrous, and his time at Luton, which was absolutely phenomenal. So we're going to have to find some sort of middle ground for him. His time at Stoke, it didn't end well. I was quite hopeful of what he could achieve there, but things just didn't click for him. Like, he was sacked after 15 games. Stoke was at the bottom of the table. He vastly underachieved with the squad there, but his time at Luton, once again, oh my word, this was the great escape. 9 games in charge to save their season. In that time, he only lost 1 match, winning 4 and drawing 4. Overall for Jones this season, I'll throw him into the solid category, because I think that at Stoke he was poor, but at Luton he was very good, so I'll throw him into the middle ground. Lee Bowyer at Charlton really was working against everything this season. I was a bit gutted to see them go down in the end, because I think that he did give absolutely everything to try and keep this squad up. Over the summer, there was a bunch of turbulence with this one with him losing players. We weren't even sure about his managerial contract. There was one point where he'd left the club. Their fans will be hopeful that they get to keep him on for next season going into League One, because he did fantastic to get them promoted in the first place. But Philippe, I think he did a good job at Charlton this season despite the relegation. And then we get to Graeme McCann at Hull City. I don't think we've ever seen a bigger collapse in Championship history than what we saw at Hull this season. They were 1 point off the top 6 in January and they went on to finish bottom of the table. He did a great job at Doncaster. I was excited to see what he'd do at Hull this season, but overall I've got to throw him into that bottom category for that run they went on. The loss to Wigan as well, I'm struggling with Graeme McCann. Tony Mowbray at Blackburn, overall I think he's done a good job this year. Really, they finished 11th in the end. I think that their summer recruitment was decent, and considering they lost, you know, arguably their best player halfway through the season in Bradley Dack, they adapted well to not having him as well. They scored a fair few goals. Someone like Adam Armstrong really stepped up to the mark this season, and for them to ultimately finish just 7 points shy of the top 6, I think Mowbray's done a good job at Blackburn overall this year. Daniel Stendhal at Barnsley, it wasn't the most popular decision at the time, I remember, to actually get rid of him, but it turned out to be a wise decision for Barnsley in the introduction of Struber. But ultimately they did struggle at the start of the season. You know, they went on a winless run, 10 games without a win. Ultimately that's what saw him sacked in the end, and I'd probably throw him into the underachievers. I think the same can be said for Pep Clotter as well. The Birmingham job probably just came a little bit too quick for him, and Birmingham showed glimpses at the start of the season. I remember there was a few games where they were actually playing some really decent football early on. Clotter did start to run out of ideas and ultimately was sacked, and this Birmingham squad I don't think should have been finishing 20th this season, so I'd throw Clotter into the underachievers pile as well. Paul Cook at Wigan I think did absolutely everything within his power to try and keep this side up, and ultimately, you know, it was a decision that was out of his hands. I don't think that Paul Cook could have done much more really. They ended the year in superb form, losing just 2 of their last 18 matches. Since the turn of the year, Wigan were really the form side in the league. I mean, the 8-0 win against Hull topped it off. It was a shame that they couldn't go that one step further and survive given the circumstances of administration, but for Paul Cook, I'm going to throw him into very good this season. I don't think he could have done much more. Scott Parker for Fulham's an interesting one to judge, because I feel like Scott Parker was sort of like destined to fail whatever happened really, you know. If Fulham went up as champions, I think a lot of people would have turned around and said, well yeah, that was to be expected, you know, they had the best squad in the league, Scott Parker has not done anything. And then if they're not promoted, people will go, oh well, Scott Parker's at fault. So really he was set up for failure from the start. But overall for Fulham, it took a little bit of time for him to really nail down this philosophy, but you know, they're a decent side to watch, Fulham. Parker's always going to be hit over the head with the bat, saying that, you know, Fulham do have probably the best squad in the league and they are expected to get promoted. You know, with that side, should he have been making the top 2? There's an argument to be saying that. He has got them into a playoff final as well after seeing their way past Cardiff in the semi-final. Very interested to see how that one goes against Brentford. But for Scott Parker this season overall, I think he's done a good job at Fulham. I'll throw him into that category. And speaking of that Championship playoff semi-final, Neil Harris is the next manager. I think he's done a wonderful job at Cardiff. I wasn't sure about this appointment at the time, you know, his time at Millwall had sort of fizzled out, but he took over this Cardiff squad who are 14th in the league, managed to finish 5th with them. It was a superb they went on at the end of the season, but made them into such a resilient, tough side to go up against. No one expected them to be making the top 6 from where he picked them up from, and for that reason, I'm going to throw him into the very good category. I think there's going to be a lot more to come from Cardiff next season. Philip Koku at Derby, overall I think he's done a good job in his debut season in England. I think that with everything he was up against, you know, losing the 3 loan players from last season, the whole Tom Lawrence, Richard Keogh situation, there's just never a dull moment at Derby, is there? And overall, for such a hectic club, I think that Koku's carried himself well, and ultimately, you know, he's brought up a lot of youngsters this season. It was always going to be a tough act to follow on from last season with the quality that they had lost, but I think he's laid the foundations for what could go on to become something really special for his time at Derby. So for this season and for the time being, I'll throw him into the good category. Steve Cooper at Swansea, I think has also done very well in quite difficult circumstances. You know, Swansea lost quite a bit in the summer, you know, the goals of Ollie McBurney, Dan James as well. They lost Borja Baston in January. He was always going to be fighting a bit of a losing battle when it came to recruitment, but the players they did pick up, they've actually picked up some really nice gems on loan deals as well. At the start of the season, after how well Graham Potter had done, I don't think that many people saw them going one better this season and actually breaking into the top 6, which they managed to do. They just fell short in the end, albeit against a very good Brentford side, but for Cooper's first season at Swansea, I'm going to throw him into the very good category. I think he did well to get top 6 with them. But now moving into the elite tier, Marcelo Bielsa is going to get into that top bracket with what he's done for Leeds United. Finally, he was a manager who was able to deliver, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do in the Premier League. El Loco, as we all know him, you know, his attention to detail is just something else, isn't it? He's coached this Leeds squad to their optimum potential, and throughout the year, they have been the outstanding side in the league, and Bielsa has been a breath of fresh air in the Championship. He's been a great watch over the last 2 years, hasn't he? And I'm also going to throw Slaven Bilic into that top tier as well. I think that the two managers that got automatic promotion in the end have been the two elite managers throughout the season, really. You know, Slaven Bilic had a bit of a rebuilding job to do at West Brom this summer after last season and the playoff heartache that they had. They lost a few big players from that season as well. Gio Rodriguez, Dwight Gale, a lot of their goals. Harvey Barnes halfway through that season as well. But it was a really successful rebuild. You know, they started the season out fantastically, only losing one game up until Boxing Day. I think a lot of people are already writing off West Brom for next season in the Premier League, aren't they? But Bilic, I think he'll have something up his sleeve. And at the first time Vaskin has got West Brom promoted, you can't ask for much more than that, can you? And so as you can see on screen now, guys, there are my final rankings for every Championship manager this season. What do you make of it? Let me know in the comments down below. Would you place anyone a bit higher, a bit lower on your list? Let me know about them down below. But apart from that, guys, that will now wrap it up for today's video. So if you did go to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. And please do subscribe for some regular Championship content. We're getting really close now to 27k, so it will be much appreciated. But apart from that, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you all in the next one.